Lost in Translation is a romantic drama directed by Sofia Ford Coppola, starring Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson in the titular roles. The movie essentially follows a gradual but blossoming intimacy between Bob Harris and Charlotte as they individually learn to navigate their own relationships and existential presence in a country where the language itself doesn't really speak to them. The film had its theatrical release in the States on September 18, 2003, with a relatively modest budget of $4 million. But it ended up connecting with the audience on an impressively large scale, amassing a box office of $120 million globally. On paper, the themes and elements can easily be perceived as generic and rather replicable with other rom-coms of its time. Love Actually, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days remain perpetual examples of what the genre itself routinely went through. The formulaic relationships, their highs and lows, and their eventual lackluster unison in the latter acts were the relative industry standards of the time. Sofia entered the industry with a slight predicament in her hands. For one, she entered with the substantial benefit of having Francis Ford Coppola as a pillar of support and artistic freedom. On the other hand was the predicament of her crafting a style and language of filmmaking that was unique to her own, not similar or associated with her father's work either, for that matter. Well, how'd she fare? Sofia Coppola ended up crafting a film that to many remains a timeless piece of romantic cinema, to which not many even in the industry have come close to replicating. Which is why I wanted to give a critique of Lost in Translation and how it expertly captures the pure essence of love, intimacy, and longing that leaves an everlasting impact on its audience. Lost in Translation visibly draws parallels from its foreign counterparts, most notably the works of Wong Kar-wai, the creative force in modern cinema's most acclaimed of romantic pieces, to which the screenwriter-director herself paid ode to during her acceptance speech at the 76th Academy Awards when she bagged the Best Screenplay. There are two incredibly profound strengths in Coppola's writing: her narrative structure and the depth her characters possess. Coppola, much like Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love, has a beautiful knack for creating distance between her protagonists before their eventual romantic unison. Rather than rushing through the act and the first encounter between Bob and Charlotte, Sofia creates a gap between them and stretches their individual arcs first, so that each of their personal conflicts and issues are effectively established. As a result, we as an audience have enough time to actually grasp the temperament and personality of these individuals and understand their consequent behaviors and reactions. If we take Bob Harris, for instance, the character's entire marital status, its conflicts, its mundanism, and his personality have all been established well beyond his first real interaction with Charlotte, with the incentive of an overseas advert only really serving as a mechanism for him to distance himself away from his current mundane life. The fax message scene serves not only to illustrate his current marital status, but the distance he has from that part of his life. The comedic take of the screenplay, of course, and the actor help highlight how the fax messages come across as rather rushed, rather intrusive, and considering his recent arrival in Japan. Additionally, Coppola doesn't take any risks in neglecting the other half of the romantic relationship. Charlotte's character development puts an emphasis on her qualities and conflicts as well, in order for that chemistry of the pair to really sink in. You can see Charlotte's detachment from her husband, how evidently distressed she is, and essentially trying to find a purpose to what function her marital life truly serves, even as she expresses her concerns to a close relative. Interestingly, Charlotte's character serves as a rather counterpart to the story. In contrast to Bob, she constantly strives to find meaning in the culture of Japan, a sense of purpose, and makes a rather proactive effort in dissecting her concerns, anxieties, and issues. Bob, on the other hand, utilizes Japan as a means of distancing himself. Sofia Coppola expertly utilizes all this development to carefully converge these characters together. All this character focus and development occurs right before their initial interaction and helps establish them as individuals first, with traits and personalities of their own, before actually advancing any romantic endeavors. As a result, when the characters finally interact around the 32-minute mark or so, there is a sense of urgency in terms of the commonality they share and their shared internal conflicts. The distance these characters have physically and metaphorically for the matter help create that excitement and tension on how Bob and Charlotte's dynamic will progressively develop. Some of the most notable scenes in romantic movies ensue as these characters finally begin to converse and interact with one another. Bob is in his most uncomfortable of spaces with a younger crowd, especially with the cultural disconnect of Japan, but the sheer presence of Charlotte allows him to be vulnerable, open up, and actually absorb the culture he's entrenched in. The karaoke can scene is an iconic scene that serves to drag out the romance that these characters are slowly cultivating. All these steps not only serve the narrative structure of the film and its intent to bring these two characters together, but more importantly adds depth and layers to these individuals, which serves the narrative rather efficiently as a result. In contrast to the neatly framed, squared off, and traditional approach of her father, Sofia Coppola takes a far more unique and rather non-traditional approach to camera work and cinematography. This encapsulates the cool and natural use she utilizes in the movie, down to the use of non-traditional camera equipment to capture the essence of her intimate and fast-paced story. Lansicord, the cinematographer, maintains a beautiful cool hue with subtle tints of light to dark blues, for example, but never really to an overindulgent extent. This stunning shot, for instance, does not put a heavy emphasis on being flashy, but rather works to maintain simplicity. The bathtub, the blue-hued sky, and the natural lighting that spills over Charlotte's face displays a uniquely soothing and relaxing aesthetic. Sofia's directorial flair is particularly traditional when filming, but she still has the tendency to capture incredibly aesthetic and stylistic shots in still frames. Routinely, occurrences include captivating silhouette shots, along with something as simple as symmetry to the frames she shoots in. Sofia also divulges into an aesthetic of camera work that wasn't particularly common for the genre in its entirety, and that includes the use of a handheld perspective. Bob and Charlotte's run through the city streets and arcades, for instance, shows the intimate yet frantic predicament that these characters find themselves in, making the story feel all the more immersive, intimate, as the viewers remain attached to the raw emotions and momentum of our characters. When it comes to the music of Lost in Translation, it's simple, but mesmerizing. Sofia utilizes a beautiful blend of shoegaze rock to provide an atmospheric and at times psychedelic sensation with its distinct and distorted rhythms. It's incredibly modern, perhaps ahead of its time. The dreamy music lends itself to a unique style in the genre that many romantic comedies at the time would be privy to. Just Like Honey by Jesus and the Mary Chain plays through the scene when Bob finally confronts Charlotte about his love for her. The effect in turn is, when Bob and Charlotte gain emotional levity and the song swells in, we all collectively feel a beautiful sense of catharsis as we follow these characters all the way through to this final and heart-wrenching moment. Lost in Translation remains to me one of, if not the best pieces of romantic cinema that has ever been produced. Sofia Ford Coppola masters the art of crafting an intimate, real, and personal story that no other piece in her filmography has honestly been able to capture. Sofia's stunning blend of experimental music, naturalistic and nuanced writing, along with a creative style that is so authentically her own, is what makes this film a timeless piece of cinema. Despite the abundant supply of artistic competition that exists in the industry, nothing quite captures the heart, longing for love, and intimacy, much like Lost in Translation does.